Hello and welcome to the show. Today we're talking live events. We're talking IBC. First IBC was way back in 1967, before me, in London, with 32 exhibitors, 500 conference delegates, and after testing a few city centre venues, made the move to Brighton on the south coast. In fact, I think Simon's first IBC was in the late 80s, mine in the early 90s, and fond memories of the pavilion on the beach.
Indeed, fond memories of the sand in between my toes at a trade show. So by this time, the show had simply outgrown the infrastructure and made the move to Amsterdam in 1992. Initially, it was a midsummer date, but ever since, well, until 2020, it's been a regular on the industry calendar every September, with over 1,600 exhibits and more than 55,000 attendees, firmly establishing itself as the leading European show.
Yeah, so we're delighted to have Mike Crimp, CEO of IBC, with us today. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the show. There's much debate over live events this year. I mean, really, how much are we looking forward? How much are you looking forward to the show? And how optimistic are you that we're actually going to get it off the ground and it's going to take place physically this year?
Well, I'm really looking forward to it, and everyone I speak to everybody wants to go. It's a different conversation for me. Lots of people used to say, "Oh, we spend a lot of money at IBC, and it's a really good show, but it's very difficult to measure what we get back from it." And kind of they've had a year where they can, because there hasn't been one. So they kind of still got the money that they would have spent, and they're working out how to spend it in other ways. And good luck to them. They've been quite innovative, but there's not a single person I've met who said, "Oh, I'm okay without IBC." Everybody wants to go back to that kind of pattern that there is in the industry, that kind of friendly rivalry we have with the people on the other side of the pond, and have IBC back in September. How likely is it to happen is a little bit out of our control, really, because this has been 12 months of unknown unknowns coming in our direction, and they're the things that are impossible to plan for. It's looking more likely all the time. I mean, the UK has got its vaccine rollout going quite well. In fact, I'm proud to say I had my first jab the other day. The situation in Europe is a little bit slower, but their plans, if you dig deep into them, and believe me, I have, means that by the end of the summer, they believe that by IBC time, they will have vaccinated enough people for the event to go ahead. There's issues around border control, and there's issues then, a very important issue about people's willingness to travel. Exhibitors really want to come, and the visitors I speak to want to, but there's kind of 50,000 of them, say. So we need to do a little bit more research to find out their willingness to do it. Personally, I think the key factor will be not just those macro safety issues, but how we're able to apply those to the right venue to make it feel like a valuable experience. Because it's quite possible there'll still be some social distancing. So we're realistic about it, and we're working really, really hard with all the authorities to do that, to make sure primarily it's a safe place, and secondly that it would be a valuable experience, assuming that people are able to get there. Now, what we have done is we've taken the first week in December as a backup date, and starts the Friday the 3rd of December as the first date. So we're pretty sure, looking at all the stats, that the market should be open by then. So we've got those fallback dates, and we're kind of put that out into the market, and we're getting the feedback from it. We had a press conference the other day, which you guys know about. Thank you for attending. And the feedback from it has been good. They've taken that as the headline, that IBC have got a fallback position, and the press seem to have interpreted that as a confidence thing. Like IBC is giving us the confidence of back up and enable us to get back on the road. Of course, there's always a chance with the press that they might have, occasionally interpret that as a weakness thing. In other words, we're not sure. But the truth is, we're not sure. Nobody's sure. So we're asking everyone to buy into the backup plan. If people do that, I think we'll have an event this year, and I think it will be good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mike, let's just go back to and look optimistically at September. I mean, the RAI is a massive 15-hall plus venue with outside exhibits as well. What measures are you planning right now to implement to ensure that people are going to feel safe when they do attend a physical show?
Yeah, so in terms of the health and safety aspects of it, I'd rather not get into that too much, except to say that we will make sure that it is as safe as it possibly can for everybody to be there. And if it's not, we won't hold the event. So, things like, temperature checks and all the sanitization and the masks and all of the things that you would imagine, we're looking at. You mentioned that the RAI is, 15 halls. It's kind of unlikely we'll fill all of those 15 halls this year. Certainly some countries will still be in lockdown and unable to exhibit. But what that does do is it gives us a lot of extra growth space, so we can spread out a bit more, and that I think will help us a lot in making sure that there's enough space for social distancing if we need it. And we're looking to the RAI and all the other suppliers that we deal with for best practice. We've got some outside consultants who are helping us. And we're also hopeful there'll be another couple of shows. The Mobile World Congress in Barcelona is a huge event, and I think they seem fairly determined that they'd like to go ahead. And there's quite a lot of lessons that we can learn there as well. So we're planning very positively for it. But, there is that caveat that, IBC's been here for 50 years. It will be here another 50 years, we hope. We'd hate to cancel the event, but we would do it if we thought it wasn't safe. But at the moment, the planning's looking good.
It's looking positive, yeah. So, and part of it is of course the content. Major part of IBC. Have you got any information on how IBC plans to deliver an engaging hybrid event for those that won't be able to make it? As you say, some countries probably will still be in lockdown.
Yes, we're doing a lot of work on this, and there's been a lot of talk about hybrid events over the last year. In fact, I've been part of a couple of panel sessions and lots of discussions about it. And my first point is always the same. A hybrid event is something, I think, which is 100% physical and 100% digital. It's not, a watered down 50-50. And because no one's been able to have a physical event in scale, no one's seen a hybrid event yet. So I like that, really, because it kind of enables us to use our imagination a bit. The way we see that is there are lots of people who want to come and they'll want some kind of immediacy. So we're looking at using, we're in the TV business, so we're looking at using TV techniques to create some sense of immediacy. So if you watch online or you're part of our hybrid event, then hopefully you'll feel a bit more part of it, because you'll have a regular, commentary and running on throughout the day in a show that's going to tell you all about the content and steer you. We've also taken we've beefed up our commercial stages a bit. It's something we started last year, and we found it to be very popular. It's getting to the stage in the industry now, I think, where some of the really big players, a good example from last year was Intel, have got a big story to tell, and so it's more about an ecosystem than it is just a product. So they kind of take a whole period of time and they tell their story and they invite users and they do a whole bunch of things around that, which is really quite interesting. So we've brought those stages onto that stage, I should say, that live stage, onto the show floor, and that will be streamed live as well. And there'll be a variety of big players that will be involved in that. Across the halls, we have got a number of smaller theatres. We actually do that with Content Everywhere every year, and that's been quite popular, and we've extended that. So they'll be themed, through the kind of through the value chain, production, post-production, all the way through. And what we're going to do there is invite exhibitors to be part of facilitated panel sessions, and they won't be live, but we're going to turn them around really quickly, like 2 to 4 hours VOD. So the idea with that really is that people who taking part in the hybrid event virtually will be able to search through that and find the topics that they're interested in. So that's what we'll be doing with the free-to-air content, and there will be some high-level keynote sessions which we're likely to ring fence, and the reason for that is that the kind of let's call it kind of platinum level delegates pay for that kind of unique experience, and so we need to protect that content at least for a while until they've extracted their value from it. What we'll also be doing is having a kind of a directory of all the exhibits, and within that, ways of contacting the exhibitors live, and you'll be able to make appointment, potentially even make video calls into them so that that they are able to talk to you. All of this is going to be underpinned by the IABM BAM taxonomy, which IBC employs anyway across all of its content chain. And its IBC 365 platform, for example, so it shouldn't be too tough for us to implement. The idea there is that when you log into the hybrid event, whether you can make it to the show or not, you'll just use your registration login that you need to get your badge to come into the show, and then when you browse around and you look at the content, that will be delivered to into a sales lead for the exhibitors that are on site, whether you're there or not. There's also a bit of a recommendation engine and one or two other things. It's all quite new for us, really. We're quite excited by it, and there's quite a lot of development for us to do. But that's, gives you a flavour of, I think, of how we could do it. We looked at lots of platforms. We weren't really convinced about the idea of having a virtual event where it seems a bit, to be honest, because you can't really replicate a booth tour or some of those things, I don't think. So we've become a bit more content led in the way that we're asking to generate those contacts. For me, if someone can show me how I can have a virtual beer with one of my friends, then I'll kind of understand what a virtual event is. I think a hybrid event is a more interesting concept. It's going to take some development, but I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I was going to say a virtual beer on the beach at the Rye just wouldn't be the same, would it? No. So if we can just focus on the exhibitors for a second, Mike. I mean, when NAB revised its plans for October, which is just a month after the planned IBC show in September, how are you seeing that's affecting exhibitors? I mean, those that would normally attend both shows, have you seen them having to make a choice, whether it be budget or logistics?
I think it varies, and I wouldn't want to, talk on their behalf or NAB's really. But I think if there is a pattern, it's that people are going to split their resource in order to cover both. The only issue they've got there is you probably can't get your stand from A to B in time. But I think people would want to split that. And the way that we have planned IBC this year, we've made an assumption that it's likely to be a European event due to travel. And we really hope that people from overseas will be able to come. But if they can't, then it's predominantly a European show. People within the EU will be able to get there. So the idea of NAB potentially, as I say, I don't want to put words in their mouth or try and choose their position for them, but it seems likely from what exhibitors are saying that they would look at that they would look at NAB as a North American event and IBC as more of a European event, and split their resource for a year.
Mm. Yeah,
Sounds like
makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, and just quickly though, you said we've mentioned the beach, and it is such an important part of the show. And I know you can't say for sure either way, but do you expect the beach to be open this September? I mean,
that's a different question than the one I thought you were going to ask me when you got halfway through. I thought you were going to ask me if the beach would be open in December.
No, I think December we can probably accept it would be closed. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know the broadcast industry. There's things called hats and gloves,
Yeah.
and if there's beer going on the beach,
Yeah.
I suspect that there might be a few people down there. Yeah, I mean, if it's outside, it's probably more likely than the IBC pub, isn't it? Isn't it really? So yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see how the social scene changes around the December event, and we're working really hard on that because it's our fundamental belief that the social side of IBC is really, really important.
It's most of what people have been missing, isn't it?
Yeah. So we reported in the news show this week, Mike, that John Honeycutt has been appointed IBC Council Chair. Tell us, for those that don't know, what that role involves and what you're hoping John's going to bring to the role.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think sometimes the IBC Council stays under the radar. We always say IBC is by the industry for the industry, and you can interpret that as it being owned by the industry, because it is. It's owned by 6 bodies which represent the exhibitors and the visitors to the show internationally. But we do have other groups. We have an exhibition committee, and we have a content committee, and we have the IBC Council. And they're all kind of steering groups, really. So the IBC Council draws together about 25, 30 people. It goes up and down a little bit from right across the spectrum. And originally, they were all broadcasters. So, senior broadcaster in China, and, one from the Middle East, and, so always someone from Globo. And, so it would be a really good group. And the way that we would use them really is we'd ask them to be missionaries from IBC. In order to do that, we gather them together a couple of times a year physically during NAB and IBC, and then other times online. And if IBC's got plans or challenges, scrutiny, for example, of all of those things is really important to us. So, for example, last year when we were considering our options around an event and cancellation, I made a virtual presentation to them, and we got their feedback. If we're thinking of doing something new or different, for example, when we launched IBC 365, we got their feedback. I mean, it's just an incredible powerhouse of important people. I mean, you couldn't pay to have them as a non-exec board, so you just wouldn't be able to afford it probably. So the whole idea of it is great, and they give their time freely because they all believe in IBC. Once we've got the plans agreed, they tend to help us with contacts and especially around content if we need keynote speakers. Most of them are eminently qualified to be the keynote speaker themselves, but they will really help us round up the people. Moving on to John, well, he's a great guy. He's really been supportive of IBC. Known him since his discovery days. And I mentioned earlier that it just used to be about the broadcasters, but more and more we've brought in other players. And John moved to Google, for example, and then he still worked with us, helping us to sort of embrace that community a little bit more, to bring some people in from that side. Now he's independent. He's got building a really strong portfolio career based on all of his success so far, and that enables him to sort of take that position of independently chairing that group. So at the moment, I know he's kind of ringing around all the council members, finding out how they feel about live events, out what their companies are feeling, gathering all that information. And in around about a month so time, we'll have a virtual meeting, and they'll all give us their feedback and their steering, and it's really, really incredibly useful to IBC.
Yeah. Just a thought that crossed my mind, and make the answer short by all means. But did you ever consider, because of London being, or UK being so so ahead of the vaccine programme, did it ever cross your mind that maybe 1 year of a London event might have been an option? XL, big space.
Well, we went through a wider sort of brainstorming process of what all the different options are. First of all, we had considered London in the past, but there isn't really a venue big enough or suitable enough to put IBC in. If there was, then the logistics of moving something so big so quickly, IBC is like an oil tanker. It's kind of heading that way, and if you wanted it to turn right fast, or I should say to starboard fast, then you would struggle. So I think we would just be creating a whole raft of different issues, and I think what the industry is looking for is things to be as logical and stable as possible during this time, and I think that probably would have just caused a very bumpy sea to go with the change of direction. So we would consider it. We always consider where IBC should be. I think most people I speak to, I'd sum it up by say, like, for most people, their heart's in Amsterdam, but their head says, well, you just need to go wherever's best for business. I think that's a good attitude. London as a big capital city has its attractions, but the social side is so important. And personally, I think the social side might get lost in a big city like London or Paris. Somewhere like Barcelona might be a bit different. When we've researched it in the past, you can look at the data lots of ways, but what it comes down to is 50% of the people at IBC like things to be exactly the same. They want the same hotel, they want to go to the beach on that day, they just want to do their routine. Another 50% are all up for change. Oh, I'm fed up with this bar, let's all go to Barcelona. So you're kind of stuck in the middle where it's working, so why mess around with it?
Yeah, that's a good thought.
Fix what ain't broken.
So finally, Mike, I mean, people often forget that mega-sized oil tanker type shows like IBC are run by a relatively small team of actual real people behind the scenes. And we know from running our own small regional events, which are minuscule compared to IBC, obviously, but the stresses behind postponing and delays, etc., that COVID has caused are considerable. How are you guys all doing? How are you coping?
Well, yes, thank you for asking. We're doing well. I mean, it's a strong team. We were really well set up with Microsoft Teams and mobiles and all of those things. We had a really strong contingency plan based on any kind of disaster where we couldn't go in the office. So we were able to very quickly adjust to working, and we did quite a lot of remote working before. So we were used to electronic communication, which I think is an important thing to be used to, because personally I think it can polarize views, because people want to be together, and what they end up doing is exploring the differences in what they're saying, whereas when you're actually in a room together, I think it's easier to pick up the physical clues and look more at a collaboration. So we had some experience with that, but we were doing okay. But once we realised what was happening to everybody in the industry, including ourselves, we made a round of redundancies. We made 50% of the team, so we went from 50 down to 25. That wasn't easy to do because we were quite a close team, and most of them I've not had the chance to say goodbye to because we can't meet. So that was quite hard, to be honest, for the whole team. And we've still got a big party planned at some point in the future, to meet up with them. To be honest, most of them have got really nice jobs since then. So at least they landed on their feet. Must tell you something about IBC. But there is, I think, a lot of them were quite young, and I asked them to rely on a couple of things, which was their own ability to innovate and collaborate with each other to get through it, which they did. And for some, who because they're younger, I asked them to grow some resilience because we were going to need it. And they've done both of those things, and we can see some light at the end of the tunnel. But as you say, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, you go down a certain road, and then something which is a total unknown comes in your direction, and then you're back to square one. So I think as a team, they're doing well, and they're very skilled. I'm very proud of the way that they've had to change direction so many times, and invest in digital. Cancelling the whole event was a big emotional drain. But every single company, I'm sure, is on the same roller coaster ride. I'm sure you guys are the same. I said to them all that when this started, as someone who worked through 9/11, for example, which was the setup day for IBC when that happened, if we recall. There are massive things that happen that shake the world, and you learn from them. As terrible as they are, you have to just learn some resilience and as I say, create some innovation to get your way through it. But thank you for asking.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed it all goes ahead this year. We're really looking forward to seeing the plans evolve, move forward. And yeah, thanks, Mike, for coming in. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Media Proxy for supporting the show ongoing. And if you want to find out more about them, please go to mediaproxy.com. Thanks again. See you next time.